They call me the Scythe. It's a nickname I didn't choose, but one I earned with every cold stare, every unyielding interrogation, every time I walked into a room and the air just changed. On the job, they don't say, "Watch out for Lieutenant Maya Kaur." They whisper, "The Scythe is here," and the room freezes. I've cleared drug dens with nothing but the weight of my reputation. I've made gangsters, men with violence etched into their very souls, look at the floor when I spoke. My reputation was a weapon, a suit of armor I forged myself, piece by painful piece, with every arrest, every late-night shift, every time I swallowed my fear and chose to be hard instead of human. I am the cop who everybody feared. My uniform was my skin, my badge was my heart, and my unwavering, icy composure was the blade I used to keep the chaos of this city at bay. I believed, with every fiber of my being, that if I was strong enough out there, I could keep the world from touching what mattered to me in here. But it was all a magnificent, tragic lie. The toughest beat I ever walked was the 4 steps from my front door to my little sister's bedroom. The most dangerous threat I ever faced was the silence growing between us. And the only person I truly, desperately needed to protect was the one person I failed, completely and utterly. She was my ultimate crime scene, and I was the one who failed to secure the perimeter. It all came crashing down with a phone call. Not the kind that comes through on the department-issued radio, all static and coded language. This was my personal cell, the one with the cracked screen from when I'd dropped it chasing a suspect. It buzzed on my nightstand, a violent, insistent rattle against the wood. The screen glowed with a number I didn't recognize, but the time, 2:17 a.m., was a language I was fluent in. No one calls at 2:17 a.m. with good news. My body was already in motion before my mind had fully surfaced from sleep, years of training turning me into a predator, all instinct and reaction. "Kaur," I barked into the phone, my voice sandpaper rough, but sharp as a shiv. There was a hesitation on the other end, a shaky, indrawn breath that sounded far too young. Is this Maya Kaur?" a male voice asked, thin and laced with panic. "Who is this?" My tone was a warning shot. I don't do pleasantries in the dead of night. I'm a friend of Anya's. She told me to call this number. She said you were her sister. She said to call you if things got really bad. Anya. The name was a physical blow, a sucker punch to the soul that instantly deflated the tough cop persona I wore like a second skin. My Anya. The one who used to hide in my bed during thunderstorms, her small body trembling against mine. The one who painted sunflowers on our kitchen windowsill and believed you could tell a person's character by the way they treated animals. My heart, which had been a steady, metronomic drumbeat, suddenly became a frantic, caged thing beating against my ribs. What's happened? The words were chips of ice, but inside, I was a 5-alarm fire. She's not good, ma'am. We're at her apartment. She took something. I don't know what it was. A bunch of pills, I think. She's breathing, but it's shallow. She won't wake up. She was crying before, saying she was sorry, that she was a disappointment to you, and then she just faded. The world didn't just tilt, it upended. Failed me? A disappointment? The words were so absurd, so cosmically wrong, they were a physical pain, a knife twisting in a gut I didn't know I still had. I was already moving, pulling on the jeans discarded on a chair, shoving my feet into boots without socks, grabbing my leather jacket. I didn't need the uniform. Its authority was useless here. Right now, I wasn't Lieutenant Kaur. I wasn't the Scythe. I was a sister. A terrified, failing, desperate sister. Address. No. I commanded, my voice low and deadly, the voice I used on peddlers who sold poison to children. He stammered out an address in the Crestview district, a part of the city I knew like the back of my hand, a neighborhood of crumbling brick and broken promises, a place I patrolled with a clenched jaw and a hand resting on the grip of my Glock. My sister lived there. My baby sister, my Anya, was in that pit of despair while I was out playing the hero, cleaning up the streets, blind to the filth festering in my own backyard. The irony was so bitter I could taste it, like copper and ash on my tongue. The drive was a nightmare montage of streaking streetlights and screaming sirens, only these were in my head, a cacophony of my own panic. I broke every traffic law I was sworn to uphold, running red lights, taking corners on two wheels, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. My mind was a storm of memories, each one a fresh cut. I saw Anya at 7 years old, holding my hand in a death grip on her first day of school, her big brown eyes wide with a terror I swore I would always shield her from. I saw her at 15, sobbing in my arms after her first heartbreak, a boy named Jason who didn't deserve her pinky finger, and me, the all-knowing big sister of 19, telling her that boys were temporary but sisterhood was forever. I saw her at our mother's funeral, her small frame looking even smaller in a black dress, shaking with sobs she couldn't contain, and me, standing rigid and dry-eyed in my crisp new uniform, my back ramrod straight, believing with the foolish certainty of youth that strength meant not showing the canyon of grief that had opened up inside me. I was so wrong. Strength isn't about building walls so high no one can see in, it's about having the courage to let someone see the cracks, and trusting them not to break you further. I screeched to a halt outside a dilapidated apartment building that looked like it was sighing under its own weight, its facade stained with decades of grime and scarred with gang tags I could identify on sight. I didn't bother looking for a buzzer. I took the stairs 3 at a time, my service weapon a heavy, familiar weight on my hip, a comfort and a curse. I didn't knock. I threw my shoulder against the door, the flimsy lock splintering the frame with a sound like a gunshot. The smell hit me first, a visceral wave that made my eyes water. Stale cigarette smoke, the sour tang of cheap beer, and underneath it, something else, something chemical and cloyingly sweet that made the hair on my arms stand up. Opiates. The apartment was a disaster zone, a physical manifestation of inner turmoil. Clothes were strewn everywhere, mixed with empty pizza boxes and discarded canvases. And the paintings, they were everywhere. Beautiful, haunting, terrifying paintings. Fractured faces looking out from storms of color, self-portraits where the eyes were pools of black despair, landscapes of a city that was all sharp edges and no sun. Anya's talent was a raw, bleeding thing, and looking at her art now, I could see the pain she was trying to exorcise, the screams she was too quiet to voice. Why had I never really looked? Why had I only seen the mess and not the message? A scrawny kid, all sharp elbows and wide, terrified eyes, stood frozen in the middle of the living room like a deer in headlights. He couldn't have been more than 19. "She's in there," he whispered, pointing a trembling finger towards a closed door, as if he was afraid to say it too loud. I pushed past him, my boots crunching on a discarded chip bag. And there she was. My Anya. Curled into a tight, fetal position on a bare, stained mattress, no blanket, no pillow. She looked like a discarded doll. Her skin was the color of parchment, pale and clammy, her beautiful dark hair stuck to her forehead with sweat. She was so still. For a horrifying, heart-stopping second, my world stopped. This was crime scene stillness. I'd seen it 100 times. The utter, final lack of motion that speaks only of absence. But I couldn't let it be here. Not with her. This couldn't be my final memory of her, in this squalor, defeated. I fell to my knees beside the bed, the tough cop persona shattering into a million irreparable pieces. The sound that came out of me was a strangled, animal thing. Anya? My voice was a broken whisper. I touched her cheek, her skin cold and damp. Anya, honey, it's Maya. I'm here. I'm right here. Can you hear me? A low, pained moan escaped her lips, a sound of pure agony. She was alive. The relief was so violent it left me dizzy, gasping for air. I fumbled for my phone, my hands that could field strip my service weapon in the dark, shaking so badly I could barely hit the buttons. I called it in, my voice cracking as I gave the address, my badge number, my rank, using every ounce of my authority to cut through any bureaucratic delay. Priority 1. This is Lieutenant Core. My sister, it's my sister. Saying the words made it real, a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. While we waited for the ambulance, a lifetime compressed into 3 minutes, I cradled her head in my lap, stroking her hair and whispering the old, silly lullabies our mother used to sing, the ones I'd sung to her when she was small and afraid of the dark. I looked around the squalor of the room, at the empty pill bottles scattered on the floor like malevolent confetti, and a tsunami of guilt and rage washed over me, so powerful I thought it would drown me. Rage at the faceless dealers who peddled this poison, who saw kids like my sister not as people, but as profit. Rage at a broken system that failed the vulnerable at every turn. But most of all, a scorching, self-incinerating rage at myself. I had handcuffed men for possessing a fraction of what was in this room. I had built a career, an identity, on being the city's protector, its avenging angel. And all the while, the person who mattered most, the very reason I'd put on the badge in the first place, was drowning in plain sight, and I had been too proud, too blind, too damn busy to even notice she was in the water. The paramedics arrived, a whirlwind of efficient, impersonal calm. They moved me aside, checking her vitals, starting in 4, loading her onto a gurney with a practiced, gentle haste. I followed them out like a ghost, my face a mask of stone, but inside, I was nothing but rubble. As they maneuvered the gurney into the back of the ambulance, one of the paramedics, a young woman with a kind, tired face, looked at me with a flicker of recognition. "Lieutenant Kaur? We'll take good care of her. We'll get her to General." I just nodded, a tight, jerky motion, utterly incapable of speech. The scythe had been rendered powerless. My badge was just a piece of metal. My reputation was a hollow echo. The only thing that mattered in the entire universe was the fragile, rhythmic rise and fall of my sister's chest. At the hospital, in the sterile, fluorescent-lit purgatory of the waiting room, the memories came flooding back, unbidden and relentless. The vinyl chairs, the smell of antiseptic, the low murmur of a television tuned to a news channel. It was a stage I knew well, but I was always in the cop role, taking statements, offering cold comfort to other families whose worlds had just ended. Now, I was the family. The script had been flipped, and I didn't know my lines. I remembered the day I decided to become a cop with a clarity that was almost painful. I was 18, Anya was 12. Our mom had just lost her long, brutal war with cancer, leaving behind a silence that was louder than any sound. Our father, a gentle man who had loved our mother with every atom of his being, simply broke. He retreated into a shell of grief, becoming a ghost in our own home, leaving me, a teenager, to parent my heartbroken little sister and hold the shattered pieces of our family together. I remembered sitting Anya down at our old, formica-topped kitchen table, the one with the wobbly leg I'd fixed with a folded-up napkin. The house was so quiet. "I'm going to join the police academy," I told her, my voice firm, rehearsed, even though my hands were clenched into fists under the table. Her eyes, so much older and sadder than any 12-year-old should be, looked at me with confusion and a flicker of fear. "Why?" "The cops are, they're scary. They came when Mrs. Gable's son went crazy next door. They were so loud. They never help, not really." "That's exactly why I'm going to be one," I said, leaning forward, taking her small, cold hands in mine. I needed her to believe me. I needed to believe it myself. I'm going to be the kind of cop who does help. I'm going to protect people who can't protect themselves. I'm going to make this city safe. I'm going to protect you, Anya. No matter what. I promise. It was a vow I made with my whole, grieving heart. I saw the law as a clear, straight line in the messy chaos of life. Right and wrong. Good and evil. I would stand on that line, a bastion of order and justice, and in doing so, I would create a safe, predictable, orderly world for my sister. I would be her rock, her shield, her unshakable foundation. I would be so strong that no sadness, no danger, would ever touch her again. It was a beautiful, naive, and ultimately destructive fantasy. The academy was brutal, a physical and psychological meat grinder. I was smaller than most of the other recruits, a woman of color in a world still dominated by a certain kind of man, the kind who thought toughness was synonymous with loudness and brutality. I was pushed, tested, and mocked. They called me princess. They said I wouldn't last a week on the streets. But every time I wanted to quit, every time I fell on the obstacle course or got chewed out by an instructor, I thought of Anya's face. I thought of my promise. I channeled all my fear, all my bottomless grief over losing my mother, all my simmering anger at my absent father, into a cold, hard, unbreakable focus. I stopped feeling and started performing. I graduated top of my class. The instructors who had mocked me now called me relentless. It was the greatest compliment I could imagine. My first years on the force, I was a zealot, a true believer in the gospel of law and order. I lived and breathed the job. I worked double shifts, volunteered for every dangerous vice and narcotics assignment. I was the first through the door on raids, the last to leave a bloody crime scene. I cultivated the stare, the one that made suspects feel like I was looking right through their skin, seeing every rotten, cowardly thing they'd ever done. I became the scythe. And with every arrest, every drug bust, every gang member I put away, I would tell myself, this is for you, Anya. I'm making the city safer for you. I'm keeping the monsters away. But while I was out slaying imaginary dragons, a real one was taking root in our home. I was missing everything. I missed her 8th grade graduation because I was staking out a known drug house. I came home with a successful arrest record and a cold pizza, finding her sitting in the dark, her graduation cap on the table. I missed her first high school art show, a moment she'd been talking about for months, because of a barricaded gunman downtown. I'd come home long after midnight, exhausted and smelling of gunpowder, sweat, and the unique despair that clings to crime scenes, and she'd often be waiting up for me, a plate of food warmed in the microwave, a silent accusation of care. She'd try to talk to me about her life, her new friends who I instantly distrusted, her dreams of going to art school, her fears about college, her quiet sadness that never seemed to lift. And what did I do? I didn't listen. Not really. I heard the words, but I processed them as data, as potential threats to her safety. I'd give her practical, police officer advice, delivered with the warmth of an incident report. That friend, the one with the tattoos, he has a look about him. I don't like it. Stay away from him, Anya. Or, art school is a financial gamble. You need a practical degree. Something with a pension. Or the worst one, the one that echoes in the hollows of my bones now, you're too emotional. The world is a hard, ugly place. You can't afford to feel everything so deeply. You have to be tougher. You have to be like me. I was trying to armor her, the way I had armored myself. I was trying to give her my own Kevlar vest for her soul. I didn't realize that her sensitivity, her deep well of emotion, was her greatest strength, not a liability. Her ability to feel the world so intensely was what made her art so breathtaking, what made her such a fiercely loyal and compassionate friend. While I was building a fortress, she was trying to build a garden, and I was trampling all over the fragile seedlings with my heavy, combat-booted feet, mistaking them for weeds. She started to drift away, slowly at first, then all at once. The late nights out with excuses that were too thin. The phone calls that would abruptly end the second I walked into the room. The new friends, with their hollow eyes and nervous, jittery laughs. I saw the signs. I'd seen them 1,000 times in my line of work. The weight loss, the erratic sleep patterns, the disappearing money, the defensive anger. But I refused to believe it. This was Anya. My Anya. The good one. The pure one. She was just going through a rebellious phase. She was artistic, they were always a little dramatic. She was sensitive, she just needed to harden up. My denial was a fortress in itself, and I was its sole, stubborn guard. I tried to lay down the law. I was the cop, after all. I was an expert in control. I set curfews I knew she wouldn't keep. I demanded to know who she was with, where she was going, what she was spending her money on. I treated her like a suspect in one of my investigations, a perp I was trying to break. I'd interrogate her, my voice cold and flat, my eyes missing nothing, until she would just shut down, her eyes going blank and distant, a vacant, impenetrable mask sliding over her face to protect herself from me. I was using all the wrong tools for the most delicate job in the world. You can't interrogate someone into trusting you. You can't handcuff someone to keep them safe. You can't threaten a broken heart into healing. The big, catastrophic fight happened about a year before the night of the phone call. She was 22. I came home after a particularly grueling day, a day that had ended with a child being carried out of a crack house, and found her in her room, packing a duffel bag. "Where do you think you're going?" I asked, my voice flat with exhaustion, my body blocking her bedroom doorway. "I'm moving out, Maya. I can't live here anymore. I can't breathe in this house." Her voice was quiet, but there was a steel in it I hadn't heard before. "Like hell you are," I snapped, the frustration of my day boiling over. "This is a dangerous city. You have no idea. You're not safe out there on your own." "Safe?" She let out a bitter, hollow laugh that was nothing like the wind chime sound I remembered from our childhood. "You think it's safe here? With you? You're like a bomb that could go off at any second." I walk on eggshells in my own home. Every conversation is a potential cross-examination. You don't see me, Maya. You see a problem to be solved. A case to be closed. A perimeter to be secured. "That's not true," I snapped, my anger rising, a familiar, defensive heat flooding my veins. "Everything I do, every single day, is to protect you. To give you a better life." "I don't need your protection," she screamed, her composure finally shattering. Tears streamed down her face, but her eyes were blazing with a pain I had finally, fully ignited. "I need my sister. I need the Maya who used to let me sleep in her bed when I was scared. The one who would braid my hair and tell me stupid stories. Not this robot in a uniform. You're so busy protecting the world from monsters, you've become one. You're the most terrifying person I know." Her words landed like a cluster bomb, detonating deep inside me. I actually physically recoiled, taking a step back as if she'd shoved me. A monster. Is that what I was to her? The very thing I had sworn to fight? "You have no idea what I deal with every day," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous, venomous whisper. "The things I see. The filth I have to wade through. The human garbage I have to touch. I do it for you." "Stop saying that," she cried, shoving past me with her duffel bag, her shoulder connecting hard with mine. "Just stop. Your job isn't for me, Maya. It's for you. It's your excuse. It's your excuse to not feel anything, to not be here, to not be human. You care more about your stupid badge and your stupid reputation than you do about me." She slammed the front door on her way out. The sound was a final, sickening crack that echoed through the empty apartment, and through the empty chambers of my soul, for months. My pride, my stubbornness, my cop's brain that was wired to be right, to win, kept me from going after her. I told myself she needed to cool off. She'd be back. She'd see reason. She'd realize I was right, that the world was a dark place and I was just trying to be her light. My silence was my weapon, and I wielded it against the one person I was supposed to love unconditionally. I thought distance would make her see the light. Instead, it plunged her into a deeper darkness than I could ever have imagined. And I let it happen. I, the protector, had driven my sister directly into the path of the danger I so feared. Sitting in that hard, plastic hospital chair, watching the green line of her heart monitor trace the fragile rhythm of her life, I finally saw the unvarnished, devastating truth. My sister wasn't a problem to be solved. She wasn't a beat to be walked or a case to be closed. She was a person, a beautiful, complex, wounded person who needed to be loved, listened to, and understood. And I had failed at the most basic, fundamental part of my job as her big sister. I had failed to love her in the way she needed to be loved. I had tried to give her order when she needed compassion. I had given her rules when she needed grace. The doctor, a kind-faced man with the tired eyes of someone who has seen too many similar stories, came in to talk to me. "She's stable," he said, his voice gentle. "We've pumped her stomach. The toxins are clearing. She's lucky you found her when you did. Another hour, and we'd be having a very different conversation." He didn't need to finish the sentence. I knew what the different conversation sounded like. I'd had it with other families. She's suffering from severe clinical depression and polysubstance abuse. This wasn't just a recreational mistake, Lieutenant. This was a cry for help. A very, very loud one. A cry for help. And I, the person whose job it was to hear the cries for help, who was supposed to hear her above all the noise in the world, had been deaf. I had been so busy listening for the screams on the streets that I missed the silent, desperate scream in the room next to mine. She slept for almost a full day, a medically induced rest to let her body heal. I never left her side. I called the precinct and told them I was taking a leave of absence. My captain was shocked. The scythe? Taking time off? What's the matter, Cor, the world finally getting to you? Something like that, I replied, my voice hollow, and hung up before he could ask more. When Anya finally stirred, her eyelids fluttering open like a baby bird's, the first thing her clouded, medicated gaze found was me. Her eyes, the same deep brown as our mother's, focused slowly. And then they filled with a shame so profound, so gut-wrenching, it shattered whatever was left of my heart. Maya, she croaked, her voice raw from the tubing. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I let you down. No, I said, my own voice thick with tears I was no longer too proud to shed in front of her. I took her hand, holding it tightly between both of mine, trying to pour every ounce of my love, my regret, my sorrow into that single touch. No, Anya. Look at me. I'm the one who's sorry. I am so sorry. For everything. I spent the next weeks there, in that sterile hospital room, and then in the inpatient rehab facility I checked her into, using my savings and every bit of my influence to get her the best care possible. But this time, I didn't give her orders. I didn't lecture her. I didn't try to manage her recovery like it was a police operation. For the first time in a decade, I just showed up. I just listened. I sat with her in group therapy sessions, not as a cop, but as a sister. I listened as she talked about the crushing, suffocating weight of her sadness, the feeling of being utterly invisible in her own life, the seductive allure of a substance that could quiet the screaming in her head, even for just a little while. I listened as she described, in heartbreaking detail, how my constant criticism, my coldness, my relentless focus on her flaws, had made her feel worthless, like she was a constant disappointment, a failed project. I hurt her, really hurt her, and with every painful, honest word, the fortress I had built around my own heart crumbled, leaving me exposed, vulnerable, and finally, truly human. And I told her about my fears, too. I cracked open the door to my own armored heart. I told her about the things I saw on the job that haunted my dreams, the images I could never scrub from my mind. I told her about the constant, grinding pressure to be perfect, to be tough, to never show a moment of weakness in a world that would exploit it in a second. I told her about the secret, gnawing fear I carried with me every single day, the fear that I was inadequate, that I would fail, that I would lose her, the way we had lost our mom. For the first time, I was vulnerable with her. I showed her my cracks, my broken pieces, my own deep, unhealed wounds. It was in those cracked, broken places that the light finally got in. The healing began there. Not just for her, but for me. We started to rebuild, not as cop and victim, but as sisters, as two wounded people finding their way back to each other in the dark. She came home from rehab different. Lighter, as if she had put down a burden she'd been carrying for years. The shadows were still there in her eyes, they probably always would be, but they weren't in control anymore. She had tools now, and a fragile, hard-won hope. I was different, too. I went back to work, but I was no longer the scythe. Oh, I was still tough when I needed to be. I was still a good, effective cop. But I was a human one. I started seeing the people behind the crimes, the lost, scared kids who'd made terrible choices, the broken families, the desperate souls self-medicating their pain. I started talking to them, not just interrogating them. I used my reputation not to intimidate, but to connect. I'd sit with a teenage kid caught with a bag of pills in a precinct interview room, and instead of glaring, I'd slide a cup of coffee towards him and say, "My sister was where you are. Let me tell you about her." The change was subtle, but profound. The whispers in the precinct changed. They didn't just fear me anymore. Some of them, I think, began to understand me. A few even began to respect me in a different, deeper way. The climax of my story, the moment that truly defined the depth of my failure and the beginning of my redemption, didn't happen in a courtroom or at an award ceremony. It didn't have a crowd or a soundtrack. It happened in our living room on a quiet, unremarkable Tuesday evening. Anya had been clean for 6 months. She was painting again, setting up her easel by the big window where the light was best. Her new canvases were different. They still thrummed with emotion, but the storms were clearing, giving way to light breaking through clouds, to colors that were warmer, more hopeful. She was working on a new piece, a self-portrait. It was powerful and raw and utterly beautiful. She was painting herself not as a victim, but as a survivor, a warrior. Her eyes in the painting held a deep, hard-won wisdom, a peace that had been earned through terrible struggle. I was watching her from the doorway, my heart so full of a love I finally knew how to express, a love that was soft and strong all at once. She felt my gaze and looked up from her canvas, smiling that old, genuine, wind chime smile. It was still a little fragile around the edges, but it was real. It was hers. "You know," she said, wiping a smear of cobalt blue paint from her cheek with the back of her hand, "all those years, I thought you saw me as a burden. A weak, messy little sister you had to carry. A liability." I walked into the room, the scent of turpentine and oil paint a perfume I now associated with hope, and sat on the floor next to her easel, leaning my back against the wall. "I never saw you as weak, Anya. Never. Not for a second. I saw you as everything. You were the only good, pure, beautiful thing in my life. The only thing that wasn't tainted by the job. I was so terrified of that goodness getting broken, of that light getting snuffed out, that I tried to lock it away in a vault. I was so busy being your guard that I forgot how to be your sister. I was so busy protecting the idea of you that I lost the person you actually were." She put down her brush and looked at me, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "You were trying to protect me from the world, Maya. You built a fortress around me. But the person I needed protection from was you. The walls were the danger." The truth of it settled over me, not as a crushing, suffocating weight, but as a quiet, profound acceptance. I nodded, the tears finally coming, not of rage or guilt, but of release. I let them fall, tracing warm paths down my cheeks. I didn't try to hide them or wipe them away. I let her see them. "I know," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "I know that now. And I will spend the rest of my life trying to make it up to you. I will spend the rest of my life earning your trust back." She reached out, her fingers, stained with a rainbow of paints, lacing through mine, fingers that were stained with the indelible ink from 1,000 arrest reports, 1,000 moments of violence and control. Our hands, a map of our 2 different wars, finally joined. "You already have," she said softly, her voice full of a grace I knew I didn't deserve. "You're here. You're listening. You're not trying to fix me anymore. You're just my sister again. You came back." In that moment, the 2 fractured halves of my life, the cop and the sister, finally merged, fused together by the heat of our shared pain and the glue of our forgiveness. I had faced my ultimate failure. I had looked my weakness, my pride, my catastrophic blindness directly in the eye, acknowledged its terrible truth, and in doing so, I had disarmed it. My failure didn't define me anymore. What defined me was what I chose to do after I fell. It was the choice to be vulnerable. The choice to listen. The choice to love more than I needed to control. My legacy isn't the long list of criminals I put behind bars or the nickname that once struck fear into the hearts of bad men. My legacy isn't the commendations in my file or the respect I commanded in the precinct. My legacy is the light in my sister's eyes. It's the sound of her laughter in our home again. It's the understanding that true strength isn't found in a badge or a gun or an unblinking stare. It's found in the courage to be vulnerable. It's found in the willingness to lay down your armor for the people you love, to admit you were wrong, to say you're sorry, and to truly mean it. They called me the Scythe, the cop who everybody feared. But the only person I needed to be strong for was the one I made feel weak. And in the end, she was the one who taught me what real strength is. She taught me that the most important beat you'll ever walk is the one that leads you back to the people you love. It's the longest, hardest beat of all, and you don't walk it in combat boots, with a weapon on your hip and a shield on your chest. You walk it barefoot, with an open heart, with your scars showing, ready to finally come home.